So if you haven't figured out there, you listeners, that the dollar is being defended by war and military, you're really not up to speed. You're barely even crawling.
This video is brought to you by Reluctant Preppers. Click here to subscribe for free to reluctantpreppers.com. So once Germany breaks away from the US dollar, the UK, what currency system will Germany embrace next?
Well, it's not determined. Nothing is definite, but there are a lot of indications that the BRICS nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and they've got a lot of support from numerous other nations, including, I believe, Japan, and Australia is probably not far behind. Anyway, these BRICS nations have a project, and it's hardly a kept secret anymore. They're going to be coming out with a gold-backed currency, and I'm hearing it's going to have 4 elements, but led by gold, and also have silver. The 2 monetary metals, gold and silver, will be officially. There'll be a bimetallic standard for this new BRICS currency, but it's also going to have a connection with the hard asset of crude oil, and I'm told some form of natural gas. So gold, silver, oil, gas. That's going to be the backing and the underpinning of the BRICS currency. And the problem with the dollar for a long, long time is that it can be printed. And you've got these central bank friends who are being given multi-trillion-dollar low-cost loans, like, 0.5%. Would you like to borrow $1 trillion, Elijah, at 0.5% and never really have to have it paid back?
Definitely. I mean, that would be a great deal.
What I find astonishing is that when I talk to educated Americans, I ask them point blank, do you think killing a president in order to take control of a printing press to give multi-billion-dollar gifts to Wall Street and trillion-dollar loans to friends, all at 0%, rarely ever having to call on that debt, do you think that's a good reason to kill a president? And they say, well, Jim, that's a little bit out of line, don't you think? I mean, that's really a far-fetched. No, it's exactly why I think Kennedy was killed. Exactly why I think Nixon was put in. Exactly why I think Kissinger was installed as Secretary of State, and exactly why I think the petrodollar was installed with the Saudis and as the leader to the OPEC nations. So the BRICS currency is going to be gold, silver, oil, gas, with most of the talk being of gold. So it will get away from a floating currency that the U.S. can print. And what the U.S. has done since 2012 with this QE, this unsterilized bond monetization, which means they're printing money to buy U.S. Treasury bonds and not removing other money from the system. They're just adding in a hyper-monetary inflationary sense. What the U.S. has done, what the Fed has done, is force nations to react because their reserves, I mean, just for instance, the Persian Gulf nations, they're sitting on $2.3 trillion worth of sovereign wealth funds. The Saudis are sitting on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of treasury bonds. The Chinese are sitting on $1.3 trillion worth, that's $1,300 billion, in treasury bonds. And we're printing it to cover our debt. This is what third world nations do. All right, so that's what the Germans are going to do. I think they're going to back fully the BRICS plan led by Russia and China for a gold-backed currency that will have other backing as well.
In the article you wrote, you pointed out that Germany's Federal Financial Supervisory Authority, BaFin, requested German banks and investment intermediaries to reveal their information about their clients' precious metal investments. Do you see this related in any way with the possible gold-backed currency you're talking about?
I think so. Remember, I came up with those 4 reasons why Germany's going to try to back out, not try, but follow through on backing out. They They want good relations with Russia for their gas supply. Displeasure with the Draghi Euro Central Bank over bond monetization. Disgust over the U.S. government with its espionage through the NSA with a corporate angle to it. And number 4 is the damage to the German population from gold price suppression. Notice that that the Germans had a long-standing request for repatriation of their gold sitting in the New York Fed, and the Federal Reserve just turned them down. Since when does a legitimate, honest bank turn down a client that wants to withdraw their account? This is not an honest, viable entity anymore. This is a crime syndicate headquartered. I call it a hive. You've got a London hive and a Wall Street hive. But what's going on, I believe, is that the Germans said, all right, let's just drop this repatriation case and also drop it with London. Both London and the United States, in addition to Paris, denied Germany their repatriated gold. Why do they do that? Well, they don't want Germany and the other nations to start backing a gold-backed currency. They don't want that. They want them to continue with the acidic, contaminated blood, the dollar. So I believe the Germans said, we'll drop this repatriation, but we're going to do a financial audit for the damage for your gold market corruption and price-fixing collusion that involves the private sector in the form of financial firms and individuals. So they're trying to find out. They're doing a very sweeping audit of all kinds of mutual funds and bullion bank accounts and private holdings, as of a certain date. Well, I think it's kind of obvious. When they're done, they can say, for every $100 that you've kept the gold price down from your corruption and your thievery, we've got X billion dollars lost to the German system and the citizens. This is a case. They're trying to make, I believe, a 4-plank, at least, 4-plank indictment list for leaving the euro. And when they leave the euro, it's just, the other sneeze is leaving NATO. They're not going to leave the euro and not leave NATO. They may leave euro and just leave the NATO kind of an unstated, abandoned table. So it's extraordinarily complicated, but I have long thought, I've mentioned in the past that the swing states have been Turkey, Saudi Arabia, and Japan, and a couple of other countries. But if you're talking about fracturing of the U.S.-European alliance, it's Germany. They've got 3,000 German companies doing business in Russia. They're not going to impose sanctions. The French had a big incident with the United States over the Mistral. That's not mistrial. It's Mistral, M-I-S-T-R-A-L. It's a type of missile, but also now the name of a ship that has the missiles on board. And the Russians had a big contract to buy a Mistral ship, maybe a group of them. It's a helicopter and armored carrier ship. So the U.S. wants France to impose sanctions on Russia when France has got a big military contract with Russia. France said, no, we're not going to discontinue the contract. We'd have penalties to pay for the contract clause. But there's another element to this. It's amazing. Every few months, every several months, I develop a new source of information. There's a fellow named Jaroslav. I'm not sure how to pronounce it, but he lives in St. Petersburg, Russia. And Jaroslav informed me about a number of things having to do with Russia and high-speed rail lines that are going to go from Vladivostok all the way to St. Petersburg. But then when I commented on what Jaroslav was telling me about German assistance with the Russians to make these high-speed trains, The Voice pitched in and said, well, there's another angle to the French military deal for Mistral ships with Russia, and that is the Kremlin is working closely on a very delicate affair of pulling back something like 300 or more tons of gold held in Paris on a Russian account from the Tsar era, from the pre-Bolshevik Revolution era. We're talking about an account that was put there approximately 100 years ago when the Romanov family in Russia, the Tsar, saw what was coming and decided to move a lot of Russian gold to Paris for safekeeping. Well, the Kremlin wants it back, and they're kind of being greased with a nice military contract with the Mistral ships. It's kind of a tip, a grease, payola, hand money, call it what you want. But the French are going to start cooperating with Russia just like Germany. And when the U.S. loses France and Germany, NATO's got nothing left.
Moving forward here, what is your perspective on, I know in your article about Germany, you talked about how the BRICS Development Bank and BRICS Emergency Fund will, quote, serve as fronts for the massive conversion of U.S. Treasury bonds into gold bullion. Can you explain a little bit about that?
Yeah, it's very hard for the West to say to the BRICS nations, we don't really want you to create an emergency fund for helping yourselves out of crises, like financial hot money movement or swoons in your stock market or difficulties with your bond market. They can't say, don't set up your contingency reserve arrangement, CRA fund. It's often called the BRICS Emergency Fund, the BRICS Crisis Fund. Remember that in 1997, I think it was, the Asians had a meltdown. Well, if they had their own regional fund, they might have fared better. So here you got these BRICS nations with something like 65% of the globe's population and maybe 40%, give or take, of the total foreign reserves, Forex reserves are often called. So they're setting up this contingency fund, this emergency fund, and it's going to be $100 billion. So what's that going to come? Where's that going to come from? From Treasury bonds. So there's already going to be a diversification out of Treasury bonds, and the U.S. is trying to tell them, well, you can have this emergency fund, but keep it in Treasury bonds. And if you happen to use it, okay, then you redeem your Treasury bonds. But don't go redeeming this and making a separate fund. Okay, then the BRICS have a second fund. It's often called the Development Fund. It also has $100 billion pledged, and they're starting to fill that up. There was a July 15th date that came and went, and there was a lot of talk about the funds that have been devoted. I don't know that they've got all the funds. I think they've done half the $50 billion for the Development Fund. And I've got kind of a joke. I've mentioned this before several times, but the Development Fund we often hear is for infrastructure projects. All right, the Tanzanian Railroad, the Nigerian Railroad, the Kenya Railroad, the cable link to touch on 5 continents around the world for alternative optical fiber communications line. We hear about a lot of different projects, but if you add up the price tag of all of them that you hear about, they come up to about $5 billion. So what about the other 95? I think the other $95 billion is going to be pledged in Treasury bonds and quietly converted to gold bullion. And the United States knows this. So you've got a lot of secretive actions going on, like PNB Paribas, like the Belgian bulge, where the country of Belgium has apparently $400-something billion in Treasury bonds that shows up. Well, that's almost equal to their entire economic size and measured by the GDP. So something big is going on. I believe, Elijah, and I believe this rather firmly, that PNB Paribas was acting as an intermediary for many different countries, including the BRICS, for dumping Treasury bonds and sourcing gold for the BRICS development bank, which I call the BRICS Central Bank. I believe the development bank for projects will be at least 90% central bank, 10% projects. The central bank will be gold bullion based. The projects will be railroads, ports, LNG facilities, cable lines, and all kinds of different things that will not add up to 100 billion. What they want is a giant central bank fund with gold to back up their new currency. And this is where it comes, the development bank.
So when this conversion of U.S. treasuries to gold bullion starts, do you see there being a huge demand for gold bullion?
Well, I think it's going to be basically a treasury bond conversion to gold bullion, and I believe it's already started. I mean, most Americans are not aware that 1,000 tons have been shipped out of London per month in gold. 1,000 tons per month since March of 2012. That's a lot of gold. That's 28,000 tons of gold. Every single month, 1,000 tons of gold. What is that? I think a lot of it is conversion of treasury bonds to gold. You know, the Chinese are often mentioned as converting, as owning $1.3 trillion in treasury bonds. Are you sure? Are you really sure? I don't know about that. $1 trillion equates to roughly 25,000 tons of gold. Are you sure the Chinese have $1.3 trillion in treasury bonds? Have you counted it? When you hear that from the U.S. press, should we believe that as much as the 2% price inflation? Or that the Wall Street banks are solvent? Or that we're not in a recession? No, the integrity and the good word of the U.S. government is gone, long gone. I believe we're seeing a massive amount of treasury bond conversion right now. I believe the Belgian bulge, that's what I call the Belgian central bank account showing 400-something billion dollars. I mean, it went from late last year, like November, December, it went from something like 40 or 50 billion up to over 400, tenfold increase in the space of, I think, about 5 months. So what's that all about? I think it's committed treasury bonds in Euroclear and Clearstream, which are clearing houses in Europe. I think it's treasury bonds pledged in those facilities, maybe even associated with futures contracts, toward gold source provision. And the U.S. doesn't like it. They noticed it. And if you look closely, the last 2 months of data for Belgium has shown no increase in the Belgian bulge of their central bank treasury bond holdings. And in the last 2 months, we had the BNP Paribas case, where they violated the Sudan, the Sudan sanctions, the Cuba sanctions, and the Iran sanctions. Okay, why do they have to admit guilt with a formal admission of guilt statement? I think because the U.S. government wants to break it up or force a merger or do something, but they halted the treasury bond dumping. You know, you can look at one incident after another. How about the London whale? Well, what was the London whale loss? That was back again in May and June of 2012. We were told it was a mere couple $100 million loss. Well, now, after a few steps, I came out immediately and said, no, it's more like 10 billion in losses. And then a week later, I said it's probably closer to 100 billion in losses. Well, now, after several revisions, J.P. Morgan admits that it was about 9 billion in losses. Well, they're off by a factor of 10. And why are the J.P. Morgan bankers at the mid-level rank being murdered in London? Well, because they know about the London whale loss. And maybe they were being squeezed by prosecutors to avoid maybe some charge of fraud or complicity or conspiracy or whatever, obstruction of justice. And they get murdered instead of testifying in a flip as they call it, by the prosecutors. We'll offer you immunity to flip and give states evidence. So they're dead. And there's several other reasons I don't care to get into, but I believe the biggest theme behind the London banker murders, which are predominantly J.P. Morgan, are for keeping quiet the London whale. And there's also a couple of Swiss reinsurance executives who've been murdered. Now, you can call them suicides if you're stupid enough, but the Swiss reinsurance executives are all closely tied to J.P. Morgan finances, some of them with insurance, some of them with mutual funds and other things like that. So we got some dumping that's going on right under your noses. But unless you're suspicious enough, clever enough, and diligent enough to investigate, you're not going to notice what the dumping is. I think the dollar's going to be rejected on the global stage, and the majority of Americans won't even know it.
Hey everyone, that's it for part 2. Make sure to click here to subscribe so you will be notified when part 3 is released. This video was brought to you by ReluctantPreppers.com. Click here to watch Reluctant Prepper's encore presentation with Ann Barnhart, where Ann Barnhart, founder of Barnhart Capital Management, exposes the hidden risks lurking in almost all of the usual places you might think it's safe to stash your family's nest egg.
Numerous other nations, including, I believe, Japan, and Australia is probably not far behind. Anyway, these BRICS nations have a project, and it's hardly a kept secret anymore. They're going to be coming out with a gold-backed currency, and I'm hearing it's going to have 4 elements, but led by gold, and also have silver. The 2 monetary metals, gold and silver, will be officially. There'll be a bimetallic standard for this new BRICS currency, but it's also going to have a connection with the hard asset of crude oil, and I'm told some form of natural gas. So gold, silver, oil, gas. That's going to be the backing and the underpinning of the BRICS currency. And the problem with the dollar for a long, long time is that it can be printed. And you've got these central bank friends who are being given billions of dollars worth of treasury bonds. The Chinese are sitting on $1.3 trillion worth, that's $1,300 billion, in treasury bonds. And we're printing it to cover our debt. This is what third world nations do. All right, so that's what the Germans are going to do. I think they're going to back fully the BRICS plan led by Russia and China for a gold-backed currency that will have other backing as well.
In the article you wrote, you pointed out that Germany's Federal Financial Supervisory Authority, BaFin, requested German banks and investment intermediaries to reveal their information about their clients' precious metal investments. Do you see this related in any way with the possible gold-backed currency you're talking about?
I think so. Remember, I came up with those 4 reasons why Germany's going to try to back out, not try, but follow through on backing out. They want good relations. The dollar was installed with the Saudis and as the leader to the OPEC nations. So the BRICS currency is going to be gold, silver, oil, gas, with most of the talk being of gold. So it will get away from a floating currency that the U.S. can print. And what the U.S. has done since 2012 with this QE, this unsterilized bond monetization, which means they're printing money to buy U.S. Treasury bonds and not removing other money from the system. They're just adding in a hyper-monetary inflationary sense. What the U.S. has done, what the Fed has done, is force nations to react because their reserves, I mean, just for instance, the Persian Gulf nations, they're sitting on $2.3 trillion worth of sovereign wealth funds. The Saudis are sitting on hundreds of. So if you haven't figured out there, you listeners, that the dollar is being defended by war and military, you're really not up to speed. You're barely even crawling.
This video is brought to you by Reluctant Preppers. Click here to subscribe for free to reluctantpreppers.com. So once Germany breaks away from the US dollar, the UK, what currency system will Germany embrace next?
Well, it's not determined. Nothing is definite, but there are a lot of indications that the BRICS nations, which is Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, and they've got a lot of support from multi-trillion-dollar low-cost loans, like, 0.5%. Would you like to borrow $1 trillion, Elijah, at 0.5% and never really have to have it paid back?
Definitely. I mean, that would be a great deal.
What I find astonishing is that when I talk to educated Americans, I ask them point blank, do you think killing a president in order to take control of a printing press to give multi-billion-dollar gifts to Wall Street and trillion-dollar loans to friends, all at 0%, rarely ever having to call on that debt, do you think that's a good reason to kill a president? And they say, well, Jim, that's a little bit out of line, don't you think? I mean, that's really a far-fetched. No, it's exactly why I think Kennedy was killed. Exactly why I think Nixon was put in. Exactly why I think Kissinger was installed as Secretary of State, and exactly why I think the petro